And welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, the historical action and adventure podcast. My name is Matthew Harvey.
And my name is Stephen A. Mackay.
We're both best-selling historical fiction authors, and together we chat about all things historical and anything that can fall under the banner of action and adventure in books, film, TV, and games.
Oh, and we also talk about rock music from time to time.
And today would be one of those times. And we're going to talk about, and in fact, we're going to do our first ever review of a rock album. First ever for this podcast, I believe.
You should know.
Well, I believe, and I'm right. I'm pretty sure, but who knows? I could be having a senior moment and have forgotten an album review that we've done in the past, in a past life, although I doubt it. Anyway, shall I say what album we're going to be reviewing?
If you know how to pronounce it with those umlauts.
Yeah, so I'm going to say that we're going to be reviewing the album. You put me off now. RökFlöte.
Very good. We'll just call it RökFlöte.
I think we should call it rock flute, but I think just for the beginning with the umlauts, we should call it RökFlöte,
nice.
Which is Jethro Tull's new album, released on
the 21st
of April, month. 2023. For anyone listening later in the future, and you don't know when it's been released, or if you're listening now and it hasn't been released yet, it's coming soon. And Stephen and I have been very, very lucky to have been sent an early release of the album to listen to. And
advance review copy, as we call it in the industry.
And what else, Stephen? What other big news have we got?
Well, the big news is that Ian himself has agreed to be interviewed for Rock, Paper, Swords, so he's hopefully coming on the podcast in a couple of weeks, and that will be very exciting for us, especially me being a fanboy.
Yeah, so Ian Anderson himself, the crazy flautist, if that's how you pronounce that, the RökFlöte wielder himself, the rock flautist will be, and songwriter and Jethro Tull extraordinaire, creator, founder, whatever, of Jethro Tull.
60 million albums sold.
60 million albums sold. So could be our biggest guest yet, I would say imagine.
So. Mm-hmm.
So we're both very excited about that, and we're both really excited to have an early listen of the new album. So without further ado, shall we get on it and start telling people what we think?
Well, let's describe it a bit first. The title kind of sets the scene. It's based around a Viking theme. And I think this is probably one reason how we managed to get Ian to agree to come on the show. It's because obviously you've written about the Vikings, and my new series is about Alfred the Great fighting the Vikings.
Yep.
The Danes, as we usually call them, in the books. So all these songs are kind of grouped together thematically around Vikings and Norse mythology, and their gods and their myths and legends and things like that.
That's right, yes. So it is all this Norse mythology. And as we're just talking, I'm reopening the notes about the album so that I've got them there to talk about if I can find them.
I mean, he's done something similar in the past with Songs from the Wood. They had a lot of more British pagan aspects to that album, which he'd found in the Reader's Digest book. I think it's called Myths and Legends of Great Britain. I've got a copy. And so he's doing something kind of similar here, but that was 1977 when I was born, coincidentally. And so all these 46 years later, he's kind of doing something similar, I suppose, but with the Norse mythology.
Yeah, and from the notes that we got with the album, he says that his surname Anderson has clear Scandinavian links, and so he's been, thinking about the past and the Norse element there, and he's obviously very interested in not only history and the history of the evolution of his name and the Scandinavian sort of myths, but it's this sort of history of and the evolution of religion. He's really talking about this sort of the myths of religion, and I think he talks about in all these notes that he's a panentheist, which kind of I think means he believes in basically the divine being in everything. and everywhere. But he talks about the whole evolution of polytheistic faiths, traveling from Asia and Greek and Roman right through into the Norse. Polytheistic, meaning, of course, many gods. And then he's taken each of these Norse gods as the starting place of each of the 12 songs, and based them loosely around bits and pieces from the Icelandic poetic Edda literature. And he's got quotes from that read by an Icelandic actress and singer whose name escapes me right this instant. But
she plays the part of the Volva.
Yes, so
who also appears in one of my books, a few of my books, Druid books.
Yeah, I've got a vulva, I suppose. It's or vulva. I don't know how you pronounce the name properly, but yes, the Norse witch or cunning
wise woman. Yeah.
I've got one actually set in Norway in A Night of Flames. They meet this mystic woman on an island. She's an albino woman who's been sort of outcast from the village because she looked so different from everybody else. Right. And she's become this sort of wise woman. So yeah, and each of these songs, just carrying on with the description, each of the songs starts off with 6 stanzas or 12 lines or 12 stanzas or something about like the historical reference of the mythology, and then the last part of the song. Of each song, apart from the first and the last one, I think, they then sort of have modern references or things that have been inspired by the myths, I guess, that Ian has picked up on. He's written all of the songs are written and composed by Ian Anderson.
Yeah, they always
important to say.
But he's leaned into the whole religious thing in the past. The Aqualung album was often kind of said to be a concept album about religion. It's not, but people think it is. And he's always said that he's against organised religion, but I don't know if he still feels that way. We'll have to ask him when he comes on.
Yeah, we can ask him that detail. Actually, sort of implies that that's still the case from some of the comments in these sleeve notes. Just to mention, I don't know if I mentioned about it before, but I mentioned the actress, musician, singer. The name is Unur Burna. It's very difficult to pronounce names that I don't know when I don't know the language really of Icelandic. But she's an Icelandic actress from Reykjavik, apparently. So, on to the actual album itself. I mean, should we just mention the band, the members of the band as well by name, and give them a name check?
Yeah.
So you got Ian Anderson, of course, playing flute and writing all the songs.
To me and to most fans that have followed the band for years, these are the new guys. But Jethro Tull have had about 4 different sets of new guys, maybe even more. And some of these I've actually seen live with the band, because they've actually been in the band for maybe 10 plus years. But the guitarist new, I think his name's James Parrish.
Right. Okay. And I thought just out of interest, you mentioned the guitar first. I mean, I thought the guitar playing on the album is really, really good. I really enjoyed it.
I think it stands out because he's actually apparently a big Iron Maiden fan. So he brings a kind of, whereas the original guitarist, second guitarist, the main one, Martin Barr, came from a much more classic rock background from the 60s music. This new guy's obviously an Iron Maiden fan, so there's a kind of heavy metal element to some of these songs, I think. Not so much in the riffs, just in the way the guitar leads are played and things like that.
I really noticed some of the. I mean, I've mentioned as we go through track by track, perhaps. I mean, I've some of the guitar solos really stand out for me. So we got, you said, Parrish on guitar. We got David Goodyear on bass.
Yeah, he's been in the band a while.
Yeah, and John O'Hara on piano and keyboards and accordion.
Yeah,
Scott Hammond on drums. So that's it in terms of the band members. So the first track is, I'm going to apologize right now at the beginning for the pronunciation of all of these names, because all the names, or not all of them, but some of them are in Old Icelandic or in Old Norse or something. So the first one is Voluspo. That's how I'm going to pronounce it anyway. So what were your feelings about this opening track?
Well, it starts with very heavy breathing, and you can tell it's Ian. And I don't know if he's putting it on purpose or if that is his actual breathing, because I know he's got COPD. So it kind of was an interesting sound for me, this extremely heavy breathing. And
so what is COPD for those listening?
Well, it's like asthma, but even worse.
Right, okay.
I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but it's worse than asthma, basically. So it's amazing that he can actually still play live and play the flute and sing while he's got this breathing thing.
Yeah. I thought with that really heavy breathing at the very beginning, because he's talking about the creation myth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did wonder if it was like breathing life into the universe, the sort of the gods breathing life into the world, into Middle Earth or something. I wondered if that was the idea behind it.
It probably is, but it reminded me of the album A Passion Play, which starts off with a heartbeat that rises in volume. And it's the same kind of idea. The music starts to intertwine with the heartbeat. And this is the same, where he's got the heavy breathing and then the vulva starts to speak in Icelandic. And it put me in mind actually of a band, Enslaved, that I talked about on the podcast before, a black metal band. And they've got a song called Fenris, which has a Viking spoken word section. And they're Scandinavian. So it's kind of similar to that before it starts with this brilliant flute melody. And there's loads of those all throughout this album.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We'll give our general summary at the end, but it's called RökFlöte or RökFlöte. But originally he planned, I think Ian had planned it to be an instrumental, all based on the flute, and it's very much the fact that he's a rock flautist, and then it became the rock from Ragnarok, kind of evolved the name. And obviously in the end he's written songs with lyrics and much more sort of classic sort of Jethro Tull sound. But the flute, I mean, I've been listening to old Jethro Tull stuff back, like Aqualung, Thick as a Brick and stuff, and although the flute is prominent in those older albums, it's not as prominent as it is here throughout the album. Like there's moments in some of the other albums where it becomes very prominent. Yeah, but here it feels like it's really front and center all the way.
Yeah, it's like, I think probably most of the songs start with a little flute melody that is then built upon, and there's quite a lot of, it's not so much flute solos that are extended the way he used to do, but there's nothing like over the top.
Was one of the comments that I actually have made in my review notes is that it's very, very flute heavy, but it never outstays its welcome. It never gets to the point that you're thinking, you're not going like, oh, please stop with the flute already. And one of the reasons I think for that is that he's blended, in lots of cases, the flute and guitar end up mirroring each other or almost battling, like doing this sort of a guitar solo battle kind of thing with the solo, then the flute and the bass sort of all doing similar things. It's really clever.
He's done that in the past. Farm on the Freeway off the Crest of an Ave album has some excellent, really heavy guitar soloing mixed in with the flute. And yeah, he kind of does that all the way through this album, but not to the same extent as Farm on the Freeway, which goes on for a good couple of minutes. But
so this first song,
this is the intro melodic, to the album.
Yes, and it's quite melodic flute we've mentioned, and guitar, and it contrasts, I felt, quite well with the spoken word, which Ian eventually comes in and does some very sort of spoken lyrics as well.
Yeah,
so it's sort of a very nice melody mixed in with this spoken word of the female voice and the male voice,
and the beat is quite a driving beat here as well, once it eventually starts. So it really sets up the album nicely.
Yeah. So moving into Ginun Gagap, which that's my pronunciation.
Close enough, I think.
Yeah, there was a...
Flute kicks things off again.
Yes, and, so it starts off with sort of chugging guitar as well, haven't we? We've got this sort of very...
Yeah, I've got the guitar.
Almost like the train chugging guitar that you get in quite a lot of Tulls.
Yeah, like locomotive breath. I've got written down here, actually. I've actually got hi-hat building up in the background, so as a kind of rock beat that's going on. And it had
Yeah,
a
I've got
really good flute melody again.
yeah. I put flighty flute was one of my notes here, and a build up, and then
Mm-hmm.
catchy flute motifs. These are just my notes that I scribbled down when I was listening. And I also I thought the voice sits well in the mix here, and it's I know Ian Anderson has had problems with his voice. You mentioned the COPD, and I know he's had other problems, but he sings. It's very melodic here. He sings, but it feels like he's singing with restraint.
Mm-hmm.
Is a way I would describe it. It's not a an unbridled powerhouse vocal, but perfectly good, and it works with the song now.
And that's the keyboards kind of stood out to me as well, because it's not a keyboard heavy album, but what
It's
is
not,
there?
no.
If it's just like the other instruments, they all fit together really nicely.
I've mentioned keyboard in a couple of songs later on, but yeah, you're right. They do stand out when you hear them, and they're noticeably there. I'm sure they're doing things like some chord, stuff in the background
backing,
I'm not noticing. But when they really sort of jump out, you think, oh, that's a really cool bit of keyboard. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I've written down here interweaving guitar and flute. So that's the second track, and they both had this. I mean, it's very instrumentally powerful stuff.
Song number 3 is called All Father, which to anyone who sort of knows anything about Norse mythology would be thinking that's Odin.
Or Odin, as we usually say.
Odin. But the strangest thing for me is that he's never mentioned by name. They only call him Allfather in the song. He's never mentioned as Odin, which I thought was unusual, because there's lots of lyrics there. You would have thought they would have thrown in an Odin somewhere.
Or mentioned Gandalf or something.
Or something, yeah. So what were your thoughts on Allfather?
Well, again, it starts with the jaunty melody. That was one thing for a kind of subject about Odin. I would have felt like it would be a heavier song. And
yes,
it's kind of almost, as I've written down, jaunty melody to start, reminds me of the very early Tull stuff.
I've put upbeat and almost floral opening bars, which it doesn't really chime
with the Allfather.
This is one of the few times in the album I'm thinking, why does this doesn't quite chime with what I would imagine? This is the god of frenzy and warfare and wisdom and stuff. I mean, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds more like a I don't know, nature almost, spirit or something.
Yeah, fun kind of thing. Yeah.
It starts off almost with like a chanting refrain, though, to calling Allfather, doesn't it? It's repeating the name several times at the beginning.
That's right.
But it sounds very jaunty and musical. Whimsical almost.
Yeah, whimsical. Yeah. But I mean, I'd imagine he's done this on purpose because he knows what he's doing. So.
Oh yeah.
That's
the drums. I made a note here that the drums in this sort of quite often accentuate the vocal line. The vocal line's got this sort of almost like chanting effect, and then the drums quite often are sort of almost like mirroring exactly the beat of the vocals. Dun 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 dun, and you get like the repetition of that, which is kind of accentuating everything and brings it really. It made me think of people chanting together.
Quite a lot of the recent, well, I say recent, but the past 20 odd years, Tull songs have got that kind of thing going on in them. But I've got really robust riffing as well written down, so. Yeah, it's another musically, instrumentally quite heavy piece again eventually, although still with a whimsical kind of feeling.
It definitely starts off very whimsical and it sort of evolves a bit as it goes on, I think, which is, again, I think that happens in some of the other songs.
Pretty much all of them, yeah.
Yeah. And this, I think it's because it starts off with the flute riffs. It's, I suppose, flute on its own is very rarely heavy.
Very melodic, yeah.
So the next one is the Feathered Consort.
Again, flute starts again. I've got written down, see a theme here.
Yeah, and it's the same musical motifs and tune as Allfather, but done with a softer sung vocal melody at the beginning.
I never noticed that, Matthew. Yeah, it must be because you're a singer.
Well, I just to start with, I thought it was the same song. I had to go back and check. It wasn't evolution of Allfather. I was listening to my headphones and I went back and thought, well, hang on a minute, and it was like into the next song, but it's got some of the same musical motifs in it. So he's obviously I think it's about the wife of Odin, isn't it? So I think he's trying to sort of pair the two together.
Yeah, it's about Frigg or Freya, which is
isn't that Odin's wife? I think, isn't she?
I don't want to say it isn't be wrong, but Freya's my daughter's name, so I should really know all about it, shouldn't I?
Well, anyway, it definitely has this balance of melody, as far as I'm aware. And I've made a note, time signature changes in this one, which were quite noticeable as well, which made it sound quite proggy. There was a few bits where the time signature suddenly changed from the chorus to the verse or whatever.
Freya is described as a concubine of Odin, actually.
Well, there you go.
So, yeah, she's definitely got a connection there.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's why the music is similar, as you mentioned. I've got written down here as well, strident beat almost marching.
No, there you go. So my final comment on this track, on my notes, was one of the weaker tracks for me. So this is one of the ones I didn't enjoy as much.
Well, I think I've written down it's like something from an Ian Anderson solo album.
That's interesting.
So I think it's a different sound from the rest of the album. So that's probably where you're coming from, that it's not quite got the same feel as the rest.
That's interesting. I think for me it was probably that slightly different feel, and the fact that it had so many of the similar motifs at the beginning. It felt almost like a continuation in a different vein of the previous thing, so it didn't feel as strong. But saying that, it's not a terrible song or anything.
No, none of the songs.
Every album has got stronger and weaker things, haven't they? And it will depend on anyone listening. But
yeah, but it's funny actually, because those two I've actually put down as my least favourite as well. Okay,
interesting.
So
moving on to the next one, which is, I think, after listening probably 10 times to the album at this point, is probably my favourite. And again, one of the other single that's been released, which is Hammer on Hammer.
Yeah, the title there, it definitely sets a scene, and I'm glad it kind of does live up to it. It's almost a heavy metal theme title there.
Great. Yeah, I really like it, and I really it was very catchy. Some of the vocal lines, especially the opening lines of it, when it's like, was there a time when I was Jupiter? That right at the beginning, where again he's obviously talking back to the evolution of religion, of whether gods have changed from Jupiter to Saturn,
they've been borrowed
to Thor or whatever. And something about it just really got under my skin. I kept on singing that line to myself. I couldn't. So, was there a time when I was Jupiter? It just really got under my skin, as musical hooks.
Yeah, because this song, this is about Thor.
Yeah.
And again, flute starts. So I think actually probably every song in the album starts.
I think every song starts. I put great opening lines after a quick flute intro. Vocal melody interspersed with guitar keyboard responses. Again, you've got this sort of call and response between the guitar and the keyboard and the flute. You got everything going on there.
And this is the one with the kind of almost heavy metal guitar solo.
Yeah,
by the Iron Maiden fan. So that's probably the standout guitar solo that's on it.
Exactly, yeah. I put here great guitar solo, flute solo reply. So he's got like the guitar solo, then there's a flute solo reply, and then there's a double-tracked harmonized guitar solo.
Yeah, that's
so it kind of really
harmonized.
Really builds into that sort of like you're saying, that sort of Iron Maiden style harmonized guitar solo, Thin Lizzy almost, that thing.
Yep.
But yeah, really, really good.
And it's a really nice guitar tone as well, all throughout the album.
Yeah, it's great, and I think the production value actually is brilliant. I know that Ian Anderson does the production, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He always has, apart from one album.
And the production's great. I mean, it all sounds brilliant.
Yep.
There's a YouTube video out for this, or there's a video.
That's right,
you can find it on YouTube. The video is interesting too. He's got a mod. It shows sort of the evolution. At the end, talking about war in modern day, and I think sort of references to the Ukraine and the Ukraine conflict and Putin are in there as well. So it's a really good, interesting video, which really goes well with the song. I got the only sort of, I mean, it's not even really a negative, but just sort of comment I wrote down here was that the falsetto. There's a line. There's a couple of lines in it where he goes into falsetto. in the melody, and it does sound a bit forced. You sort of think this is a guy he's struggling to get there, but it doesn't sound like he's struggling. It just sounds like it's forced, not quite as strong as it would have been once. But the rest of the singing on the whole track is strong, and he does a couple of moments when he drops into spoken, just for a couple of words. So there's another bit that really is stuck in my mind, which he goes, "At Ragnarok, gory conclusion." So he goes from the Ragnarok spoken into the singing bit, which really works well as well. It sort of brings it all down, and then he hits some of the melodies in this are great fun. Really enjoyed it. I keep going around to myself going, "At Ragnarok,
he's
gory conclusion." He'll be hiring me on to do his recording next time.
Well, he's an expert songwriter, and he knows how to make commercial songs if he wants to. So, he's got all these years of experience. So although the album is not what I would term commercial in any way, it's still got moments on it that will stick in your mind, hooks, like you're singing there.
Definitely got a hooky bit, yeah.
Yeah. And it moves on to another one of my favourite. I think it gets quite strong at the end here of the album. Wolf Unchained.
Wolf Unchained, yes, that was probably my second favourite. Or maybe, it's one of the standout tracks.
Yeah, I've got 5 out of 5 for this one.
It's because it's heavy, isn't it? Again, it's a heavier
thing.
Well,
a kind of straight on rock beat without much messing, although there is a repeating flute motif to start again.
Yeah, I've got notes. Starts with a howl. There's a howling wolf. Fenris the howling wolf, which it's almost comedic. That howl at the beginning, it's like almost funny, it's
been done so many times. I'm sure Robin of Sherwood, in fact, they definitely did, had an episode with that. Probably the same wolf howl as it's probably a standard.
To start with, I thought it was Ian Anderson doing it himself.
It might be. It could well be
a bit, but and it might be. Who knows? But we can ask him. That's a question we can ask him.
I think he's got big dogs, so maybe it's one of his real dogs. I don't know.
Could be, yeah. So I've got a great rock song, power chords, dancing flute, light keyboards, and driving drum beat.
Yeah,
again with a chugging
good
guitar.
Pace. And every instrument works together. And I've actually written down, this is not an old man's album. This is cooking.
Ah, brilliant.
So that is this is one of the rockier. And there's 2 instrumental sections on it as well, and it ends with another wolf howl. So
yeah,
I think you can hear by the way we're talking here that we both really enjoyed those 2 tracks there, Hammer on Hammer.
It's a great one. I put here well sung vocals. I put in brackets here lots of reverb. There's a bit when there's like loads of echo put on the voice, but it worked, in the song. I put toe tapping bass and drums. So mention to them, and the lead into the flute solo that soars briefly, and then the guitar solo intertwining with the flute part. And then I love the allusion in the lyrics to modern dogs dreaming of a wilder past, wanting to disembowel the postman's corpse, which I just thought was hilarious and made me think of our dogs barking at the postman.
That's ringing a bell. Being the Uber Tull fan, there's another song that he's got very similar imagery. It's about a cat though. And it's about a modern cat, and it's going out hunt by numbers, I think it might be.
Okay.
He's got a few songs over the years about various animals and domestic animals being the hunters and things like that. So he's obviously still going on with that. He's got his themes, hasn't he, that he likes.
Yeah, well, my dog Blue, he looks all fluffy and cute. But I always say to my wife whenever she sort of tries to sort of make him really cute, I always say he's a wolf. Don't say that.
He's
a wolf in his mind. He's a wolf, because she'd say, "Why are you going so crazy barking at people?" I'm like, because he's a wolf. So if they come close, he's going to rip them to shreds.
Protect
That's
you.
what he's thinking. So moving on to the next one, which I've actually got down this one as my least favourite of the album, The Perfect One, which is kind of an ironic title.
It's strange because I've rated all the songs as well, and this is again one of my lowest. So we're both kind of on the same page here without having talked
without
to each
conferring,
other.
Because that was I thought that was an important thing. If we're going to do more of these sort of reviews of anything really, it's quite good, like we did with the Lord of the Rings things as well.
Yeah,
we come at this both with our own point of view. We don't discuss it in advance. So that's how we've approached this. So yeah, I put slower, more melodic with acoustic guitar and flute before distorted guitars and drums kick in. And then I've put album track, less dynamics than the other songs, quite forgettable. Worst song on the album? Question mark. That's my brief summary.
I've compared it to something off the Rock Island album, which I think is 1988 or something, and it's kind of widely considered one of the weaker albums. So, yeah, if it fits on there, I can see why you would think of it as one of the weaker songs on this album. But it just shows the quality of the rest of the album, that the 3 songs we've picked out has been kind of weaker than the others. They're still good.
Yeah, it's not a terrible song.
Yeah.
It's not a dreadful song by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, I think it's because some of the other songs are so good,
stand out.
Stand out that it's then if you got a sort of an average song, it really is noticeable.
Yeah,
and I suppose it's very unusual to have an album with 12 songs that every single song is. Brilliant.
There's no many albums like that. Is it Appetite for Destruction or Def Leppard's Hysteria or something would be something
there's
I would
not
look
many.
at, and there's no.
There's not many like that. You could probably name like 10, and maybe one of them might be a Jethro Tull song.
Well, I could probably most Jethro Tull albums, I would think every song's a 10 out of 10, but that's just because I'm a huge fan, super fan.
But if you go to places, to albums like Aqualung, perhaps, potentially that's one that would be widely considered to be like a standout album across the board.
Or Thick as a Brick, which is just one song anyway.
Yeah. Moving on to track number 8, which is called Trickster and the Mistletoe. Yeah,
this is a very classic sounding Tull song with a folk kind of melody going on.
Absolutely. I've put down echoes of songs from the wood with a question mark.
Yeah, well, I've wrote a kind of Stormwatch vibe going on, which is the album came 2 after Songs from the Wood, but they're kind of seen as a trilogy. Songs from the Wood, Heavy Horses, and then Stormwatch. Those 3 albums are kind of their Tull's folk period, supposed to be. So yeah, Songs from the Wood, Stormwatch kind of vibe, and it's basically quite folky. So
yeah, I've used the term folky as well.
Yeah, and it's almost anthemic. I thought the verses, as in a kind of national anthem, God Save the King style, the way the verses are kind of done.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it starts off again with flute, but very staccato this time. It's staccato and drums with guitar. There's lots of syncopated rhythms, I thought, in this one as well. I put classic sounding folk melody. Yeah. The melody sounds like you've heard it before. I don't know if it is taken from something that we've already heard before, like a real folk song, or if it's just written in such a way as to sound.
No,
but it's one of those melodies that you think, have I heard this before?
I think it's just
so catchy and
I think it's just because he's so good at writing these type of melodies. But there's some accordion as well in this.
I've written that you can imagine the flute part being part of a medieval song. It sounds like it's been played a million times before throughout history. It feels ageless almost, timeless. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, again, Tull have always had that kind of medieval kind of essence to them, I suppose.
And leading into a great guitar and flute battle as well, I've put here.
Yeah, and I've written down that there's a kind of main accordion stroke flute motif, so I don't like the accordion as an instrument, and there's a few, I think, Ian solo songs that I've got accordion in it that I find really like grates in my ears, the accordion, but it's fine here. And then there's other songs that it's okay, and it definitely works in this song.
Okay, obviously Ian likes the accordion because he uses it quite a bit, or has it on lots of his stuff. Moving on then to track number 9, Cornucopia. Or Cornucopia.
Yeah, that's reminded me of the last song on his A album. It's called And Further On, and it's a very it's like a beautiful flute and piano melody, not on the And Further On, but on Cornucopia. And it's melancholic almost. It's a really, really nice piece for like the first couple of minutes.
I've put here, so it starts with pastoral flute, some acoustic guitar, and lyrical melodies that speak of fruit and flowers. That's sort of what it sounds like. You could just imagine yourself walking through a meadow.
Yeah, exactly.
It's perfect for the song title. I said it's easy to imagine trees heavy with juicy fruit on a summer evening. It's that kind of vibe. Very melodic and nice.
It's a different kind of pace as well, because the rest of the songs are all kind of mid-paced or slightly faster, and this one's kind of slows it down. And I've written down any Tull fan will love this. And how does Ian still come up with these melodies in the flute after so many decades? So, yeah, I mean, he's really knocking out the park with these flute melodies in this album, and his voice sounds pretty good in this song too.
Yeah, I think it is a good. It is good. I mean, I think people can hear by this point that we're both enjoying the album. We've enjoyed listening to it, and we're enjoying it. It's definitely a good album. Next up is The Navigators, track number 10, which I think again is a single.
There's another
I think there's a single
for this,
video for this one. Yeah,
there's a lot actually. I had a wee look at this last night. Viking longships and things like that. So this definitely leans into the Viking theme in this song and the video.
And then the modern reference is kind of like fishermen or people.
Well, there's a fisherman's boat in it as well with RökFlöte as the name and stuff. Yeah, or RökFlöte.
Yeah. Pushing guitar and bass lines, mirroring
pumping
the
bass,
flute. Punchy and tuneful vocal lines, good guitar, bass and flute, keyboard accents, trilling up and down. Kind of my notes there.
We're on the same page so much here. It's kind of freaky. I've got written down here. The main rhythm guitar is on the right channel, on the right speaker, and there's little stabs in the left before the flute goes off again, and the guitar spirals behind it. So we're kind of both writing the same things.
It's funny because we're both listening to the same songs, and you're obviously listening from not just a musician's perspective, but from a producer's perspective, because you produce and record some of your stuff as well. And so you're listening, you're thinking, right, so he's got this placed in the left ear, and then it's
definitely
sort of behind
always,
that. And that's interesting, because I do sometimes think about that, but obviously I'm much more about the melody,
the overall feel,
kind of the overall feel, and and I'll make more reference, I think, to the vocal lines and things, but. But we definitely seem to agree on everything. So that's a really great song.
Yeah, that's another 5 out of 5 for me, that song, really. And there's another classic Tull kind of start-stop section there before the driving rhythm section's back again. So that's another really good one. Strong song.
11, track number 11, Guardian's Watch. Flute opens with, and I've put in a question mark here. It's like a harpsichord sound, isn't it, really, in this one?
I've just called it a kind of English organ.
Okay, so it's some sort of old-fashioned style.
Yeah, it's like
organ,
a church organ, I think.
Something.
Not really a Hammond organ, but more like
it's much more modern. Much more old.
Oldie, medievally type feel.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've put. It sounds almost like an Enlightenment song or something from the 17th century or something. This doesn't sound modern at all, this intro. It sounds very sort of old-fashioned, but in a good way. That's not a bad thing.
Well, I've called it English Country Garden flute melody. That's what put me in mind of, English Country Garden type.
What, like the Darkness song, or the
not that one. No, that is a cracking song, but no, it's more like that kind of idea of
course,
people
you could just drop in your Darkness bit of trivia though. And Ian Anderson.
That's right. Ian Anderson played a flute solo on one of the Darkness songs called Cannonball, which is a really good hard rock song and taken to stratospheric levels by the addition of Mr. Anderson's flute solo. So definitely check that out on YouTube, because it's not on Spotify.
Yeah, Cannonball. It was an extra track, I think. It was not released.
Yeah, the Hotcakes album that was on. Yeah. So if you've got the Hotcakes album, you might have it.
Yeah. And I've written other notes here. I put the guitar and bass and drums with keyboard stabs kick in, and eventually the song turns into a heavy rock song.
Yeah, well, I've written down this is almost metal, and the drums really shine, and we've even got glockenspiel too, I think, in the back. I'm sure I could hear that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like the way that it starts off, though, almost like something from some pastoral, old, medievally English garden sound, and ends up as like a heavy metal, heavy rock song.
Definitely. And
what an evolution!
And even for the first time I've noted it down anyway. I think you mentioned it, but I never noticed it earlier. But on this song, there's an acoustic guitar arpeggio backing up the flute as well. So I mean, everything is kind of going on here, and it works really well. Almost like something that could have fitted in thick as a brick.
Yeah, it's really good. And then we're on to the last song, which is called Ithavol. And this is, again, we're back to the part spoken stuff by the female Icelandic singer. But it starts with a flute, which sounds almost like a bird call at the beginning of this.
Well, I've written
I
down, it
thought,
reminds me of a song. I don't know if you remember them, the old electronic band, The Shaman.
I know the band, but I don't know.
Ebenezer Good. But they also had some other albums that were more like trancey kind of world music stuff. And the flute melody that starts this song really reminded me of a Shaman song. I'm going to have to try and find out if there is one with the same melody, because it's one of those things that sticks in your head and you think, I'll need to check that out. But
yeah, it sounded almost, as I say, it sounded almost like a bird to me. So it sounded sort of very different, I guess. So you're saying it sounds like a world music kind of trancey thing. It's very different from the other melodies that we got from the rest of the album. Yeah. Then we got stabs of guitar and bass, keyboards and drums, then overdriven guitar take up a mournful refrain. That was me getting lyrical there with the. And then we have the spoken. Then we have the spoken words from the Icelandic singer. And then I've put complex keyboard, and I put in brackets early Marillion sounding. That sounds a bit like Mark Kelly from Marillion going all widdly with the keyboard and the sound. I think there's something about the sound which sounds very much like 80s Marillion to me.
I'm not really familiar with Marillion at all. They were never really heavy enough for me, but I've written down nice keyboard section, so it's obviously a part that sticks out. Yeah.
Perhaps you should listen to the early Marillion if you like the keyboard plays of this. Mark Kelly's got great.
I liked Incommunicado. That's a really good song.
Yeah, there you go. With the great Scott Fish, Derek W. Dick, otherwise known as Fish, on vocals.
Who is actually, I believe, a friend of Ian's. I think they've been out for curry together over the years.
Well, there you go. I'm surprised they haven't worked. Have they worked together?
No, I don't think so, no. They've maybe played gigs together or something, I don't know. But it'd be funny to walk into a curry house and see those two sitting there, eh?
Yeah. I've seen Fish live before. Very, very good. He's a great frontman, obviously amazing.
Big guy, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, I saw him. I'm pretty sure the gig I saw him, he actually got off the stage and walked a heckler out of the place, threw him out. Because some guy was getting on his tits so much. And he's 6'5", he's huge.
Oh, well, that's what he's a big guy.
And he said to the guy, you don't shut up. You're out. And the guy was just like going, oh yeah, you and whose army or whatever. And he just got down. It's a small place. It's like about 400 seat place or something. Standing like a big pub sort of kind of gig in Bristol. And he just got down off the stage, just like basically grabbed the guy by the collar and just took him to the door and just chucked him out. And he's got a big cheer from the audience. And got back up onto the stage and just said to the bouncers, don't let him back in. That was it. And goes out.
Don't annoy Fish then if you're ever at one of his concerts.
Don't annoy Fish. So yeah, I've put here, Anderson delivers breathless vocals that feel slightly forced and strained, and I think it's because it's maybe part of the poetic Edda translated into English. It doesn't rhyme at this point, which sounds quite out of kilter with the rest of the album, and it somehow makes his spoken lyrics or words at this point a little bit less potent than maybe they should be. That's how it felt to me.
I'm not sure, because the female voice goes into the heavy breathing at the end of this, so it could just be that.
At the very end, he then goes into the heavy breathing, and we end with the deep breaths again, which is quite cyclical. But there's a bit of the lyrics that just doesn't. To me, it felt like he's running sort of one line into the next, and it all feels a bit rushed. I don't know, or maybe there's a reason. Maybe that's
maybe that's the world winding down or something.
It's the end of the world.
To Ragnarok,
yeah. But I've added the note here that it's quite a flat ending to what is a powerful album at most of the way through. So it felt a little bit anticlimactic by the very end of the song, but then again, it is the end of the whole thing. It sort of winds down. So,
well, I've got it. This is a 4 out of 5, so it was definitely a good song. I think the problem is the previous couple have been really good again.
I think that's it. So general thoughts then. I think we can both agree that it's pretty good. So, what are your general thoughts?
I think he's it's not a collection of like simple rock songs. Like the one I mentioned earlier, Rock Island, that was a bit more simplistic. It was kind of like commercial rock songs. And he's got one called Catfish Rising, which was kind of bluesy rock. And this is not like that really at all. They're short songs, but they're more on the progressive side, I would say. You know, he's really stretching his musical and songwriting muscles, despite the fact that they're short songs.
Yeah, I've put my overall feeling is I really enjoyed the album, and the flute is prominent, as we mentioned, in all the songs, which I think is really apt, of course, for the title of the album. But it's never too much. There are moments that are reminiscent of classic Tull, while the production still sounds modern. In many places, the guitar, flute, and bass mirror each other, but there are many intricate flute and guitar interwoven solos. The whole album has a cohesive sound and feels part of a single entity, which I think is saying the same as you. It feels like a concept album, and it all sort of hangs together as a whole.
Yeah, and none of the solos, although they're really well played and they're great, they're not flashy. You know, they're not, the guitar solos aren't like Yngwie Malmsteen, where he's playing like a 10-minute solo, just whittling away for the sake of it. You know,
well, I think that's the case with all the solos with the flute as well. It's all
the keyboard
it's like
parts and stuff.
It all serves the song, and it's showy enough that you think, wow, that's great, but then it's done. You know, it's not like, wow, that's great, let's hear that for another 5 minutes. It's like none of the songs are long. The whole album is relatively short. It's like a proper album length, like from back in the days of vinyl. It doesn't feel like it's stretched to
too
fit
long.
A CD or something.
Something that really helped is the sounds on the album. Like, he's used bamboo flutes in the past, and some of the old keyboard players, the instruments he used to like fake strings and things like that, and none of that's kind of on here. He's using to me, it sounds like he's using his usual concert flute, the metal one anyway, and the keyboard sounds really good, almost old vintage style keyboards, and so there's nothing really jarring to my ears that would put me off. You know, it doesn't date. This album won't feel dated in 20 years, I don't think, whereas maybe some of the previous Tull albums, because of those keyboard sounds in particular, they do sound kind of the time, but this doesn't.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've my final line is I've put RökFlöte is a strong, assured concept album that will satisfy Tull fans worldwide.
I've written a modern classic hot on the heels of the superb Zealot Gene, which he only released I think 2 years ago, and that was not as good as this, but it was a very good album, and he's got another album due out next year.
It feels like, you know, like I think you said earlier on something about this is not an old man's album. It doesn't feel like a guy who's kind of just going through the motions to make a bit of extra cash or whatever. This feels like a proper creative venture, and he's done it. He's really pulled it off. So you know, I think it's really, really good.
I totally agree, and especially after putting one out 2 years ago, you know, you would a lot of bands that would be their ideas would be dried up for a while. So I'm not sure how old Ian is. He must be
75, I think.
75,
mid-70s, something like that. Yeah. So it's brilliant, really good. So both Stephen and I have written full reviews based on these notes, and we posted them on our respective web pages.
Or we will do blogs, if we haven't done yet.
Well, I'm sure we will have done by the time this is being listened to. So yes, and as we mentioned at the beginning, don't miss the upcoming interview with Ian Anderson that is scheduled for us to meet him in a couple of weeks, and then it will drop, you know, a week or two after that. So when you listen to this, if you listen straight after the release of this podcast, it probably won't be available yet, but it will be upcoming. But if you listen to this a couple of weeks after the release of the album, it'll probably be
it'll probably be a couple of days after this comes out, probably.
And we've got some other great guests lined up as well, not just Ian Anderson. We've got other rock musicians, we've got other writers, and other episodes.
This week's main episode, this will be a bonus episode, but Friday's main episode is David Gilman, isn't it?
David Gilman, who's a great guest, historical fiction novelist and screenwriter, and incredibly interesting guy. So if you're more interested in that than the rock music, go off and check that out on Friday.
Well, you probably won't still be here if that's the case.
That's probably true, but whatever you're thinking, he's an interesting guy, even if you don't think you're interested in the interview. Writing.
Then we've got Todd Cairns from Slash's band. Due up at this first week in May, I think. So
proper rock god kind of guy as well.
Yeah. He's definitely one that we really enjoyed because he's a musician, rather than just authors that we've mostly spoke to so far.
So we've got some episodes coming out where it's just me and Stephen talking about different aspects of writing and history and things. So we've got loads of stuff, loads more guests, loads more content coming out. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe, not so you don't miss out anything in the future. And thank you for sticking with us and listening.
Yeah, and please give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app of choice. It really helps us to try and find new listeners.
Yeah. And share away on social media and all of that, which brings us to the end. That's it for today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. And let us know if you've got any questions or anything else you'd like us to cover in future episodes. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/rockpaperswords podcast, and also on Twitter at rock_swords. You can find out all about us on our websites, matthewharvey.com and stephenamackay.com.
Theme music is written and performed and copyrighted by us. Until next time in Rock, Paper, Swords, it's goodbye from me, Stephen A. Mackay.
And it's goodbye from me, Matthew Harvey.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind, stay safe, and
happy reading. RökFlöte.